Picture it, America. Let's be a little more specific. The United States, mid-1950s. Shiny cars, new highways, flags, diners, jukeboxes glowing in the corner. This is the America selling itself as confident, prosperous, victorious, and free. And then Robert Frank showed up with a camera. Quiet, foreign-born, unsentimental. He did not photograph the United States from its favorite angle. He photographed the crack in the mirror because his photo book, The Americans, is an immigrant's eye turned toward a country drunk on its own mythology, a country calling itself exceptional, while segregation, loneliness, consumer fantasy, and Cold War anxiety moved just beneath the shine. Welcome to Art Happens, the divine mess of art history, presented by J-Squared Atelier. I'm James William Moore, and today we're looking at Robert Frank's The Americans, the road trip that turned post-war US into poetry, disillusionment, and one very uncomfortable mirror. Before we get to Robert Frank, we need to talk about the United States he was driving through. The Americans happens in a country very busy telling itself a story. A big one, a loud one, a story with marching bands, a mortgage plan, and possibly a casserole. Post-war US was not simply imagining itself as successful. It was imagining itself as the inevitable. This was the country that had won the war, built the suburbs, filled the highways, stocked the supermarkets, and now carried itself like it had the moral authority to tell the rest of the world how modern life was supposed to look. There is a little manifest destiny still humming under all of this. Not in the old covered wagon way exactly, though honestly, the US does love a rebrand. But in the belief that expansion, consumption, dominance, and national confidence were proof of virtue. More cars, more highways, more appliances, more military power, more cultural influence, more America. But underneath the shine was something much more complicated. Segregation was not a footnote. The Cold War was not background noise. And the American dream was not equally available to everyone. So when Robert Frank traveled across the United States in the mid-1950s, he was moving through a country trying very hard to look unified. And he kept finding fracture. Frank was born in Switzerland in 1924, and that matters, because The Americans is not the tidy immigrant story the US loves to tell about itself, where someone arrives, smiles gratefully, and confirms that the US is the greatest idea anyone ever had. Oh no. Frank gives us the immigrant not as witness to the American greatness, but as witness to the American performance. He sees the costume, the stage lights, the patriotic backdrop, the way power dresses itself up as innocence. To many in the US, the 1950s were proof that the system worked. To Frank, the picture was less stable. He understood that a country can be rich and still spiritually poor. That tension is the engine of this book, The Americans. In 1955, Frank received support from the Guggenheim Foundation to travel across the country and photograph American life. And I do love the idea of America accidentally funding one of the most quietly devastating portraits of itself ever made. It says, "Please document our great nation." And Frank comes back with, "Absolutely, here's your loneliness. I found it near the jukebox." Frank traveled across the United States in 1955 and 1956, making thousands of images. Out of all of that, he edited the project down to just 83 photographs. That matters, because The Americans is not an archive. It is a sequence, a rhythm, a visual poem, a flag, a car, a diner, a parade, a funeral, a jukebox, a road, a face turned away. The images echo each other. And by the end, you don't feel like someone has explained America to you. You feel like you drove through it at night, half awake, with the radio fading in and out, and something you couldn't name sitting in the passenger seat. Frank gives us fragments, glimpses, symbols, moods. The country appears through its surfaces, but those surfaces keep betraying it. One of the greatest things about the Americans is that Frank does not need exotic subject matter. He uses the ordinary stuff of American life. Flags, diners, cars, gas stations, lunch counters, hotel rooms, jukeboxes. The everyday temples of post-war US. But in Frank's hands, these symbols start misbehaving. The flag is never just cloth. The flag is nation. Promise, performance, power, belonging, exclusion, memory, myth. In Frank's photographs, the flag appears again and again, but rarely as a clean symbol of triumph. It hangs, it flutters, it divides space, it obscures faces. And through Frank's lens, the flag starts asking questions it maybe was not supposed to ask. Who gets to stand beneath it comfortably? Who is hidden behind it? Who is left outside the promise it claims to represent? This is the post-war United States presenting itself as defender of democracy across the globe, while Black Americans are still fighting for basic civil rights at home. Frank does not tear the flag down. He lets it hang there. And somehow, that is worse. Because the symbol remains intact, but the photograph drains it of certainty. Then there are the other symbols. The jukebox becomes a glowing shrine of longing. The diner becomes a stage where people sit close together and still feel alone. The car becomes American freedom on wheels, but also isolation sealed behind glass. The road becomes both promise and trap. You can go anywhere, but what happens when everywhere feels haunted? The post-war US loved the idea that abundance meant happiness, that buying more meant becoming more, that the full parking lot, the full diner, the full jukebox, the full highway, all of it somehow added up to a full life. But Frank's photographs suggest the opposite. The spaces are full, but the people feel isolated. The signs are bright, but the mood is dim. The machines are modern, but the emotional weather is old. Loneliness did not appear because someone invented better chrome. Frank looks at the visual vocabulary of American optimism. The car, the highway, the neon sign, the lunch counter, the flag, and finds melancholy inside it. Not because he hates the US. That reading is too easy. He sees the gap between what America says it is and how it actually feels. And that gap is where the photographs live. Here's the thing about showing a country its cracked mirror. The country does not always send a thank you note. When the Americans appeared in the United States, some critics saw it as bleak, unflattering, anti-American, which is fascinating. Because nothing makes a national myth more nervous than an outsider who notices the seams. Frank was not photographing the US the way the US wanted to be photographed. He was not hiding the camera like a loyal publicist. He was looking at the United States as a place of enormous power, but also enormous contradiction. And to some viewers, that felt like an insult. How dare this immigrant look at America and not be dazzled? But Frank's photographs did not invent America's contradictions. They revealed them. Sometimes, what the US calls anti-American is simply someone refusing to flatter it. That is the uncomfortable gift of the Americans. It does not let national pride be the same thing as national honesty. It does not let prosperity cover over absence. It does not let the flag end the conversation. It also changed the language of documentary photography. Frank's photographs were not always polished, balanced, or polite. They could be grainy, tilted, blurred, off-center. But that instability became part of the truth. America looked off-kilter because Frank felt the country itself was off-kilter. No wonder Jack Kerouac wrote the introduction for the American edition. The book moves less like a report and more like a restless road poem. Robert Frank did not give us America as it wanted to be seen. It gave us America as seen by someone not fully seduced by the dream. An immigrant's eye, a stranger's eye, a poet's eye. A camera moving through the prosperous, dominating, self-mythologizing United States and not finding certainty, but fracture. That is why The Americans still has teeth. Because it's not just a book about the 1950s. It is a book about the danger of believing your own mythology, about manifest destiny after the frontier. When expansion becomes highways, when conquest becomes consumer culture, when dominance becomes lifestyle, when the dream becomes advertising. Frank did not photograph the US to destroy it. He photographed it without kneeling before it. Robert Frank took a road trip through the country, but what he really photographed was the distance between image and reality, between national competence and private loneliness, between the flag and the people standing in its shadow, between the myth of prosperity and the poetry of disillusionment. This has been Art Happens, the divine mess of art history, presented by J-Squared Atelier. I'm James William Moore, your chaotic guide through art history. Keep looking closer, because the photograph is never just what it shows. Sometimes it is what the whole country is trying not to admit.